Hi everybody, my name is Kim and welcome back to Bookmarks and Breadsticks. Hi and welcome back to Bookmarks and Breadsticks. If you're new to my channel, a special hello. I am here today to bring you a long-awaited book duos. If you're new to my channel, book duos are when I compare two books either of a similar topic, genre, or a similar interest. Sometimes I've done book duos about different audiobooks, what works well and what doesn't. Other times I've done book duos about memoirs from the perspective of two different female chefs or two different LGBTQ plus chefs. This is another example. Today I'm going to talk about two different important culinary condiments that have really impacted our world. Salt, written by Mark Kurlansky, or pepper, written by Marjane Shafer. So first, I will admit that salt has been a labor of love for me. I've been trying to read this book since last, I think, October, and I promised Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative I would get this read. So I did it, yes! And I found pepper while volunteering at Open Books, and the first thing it says on the cover is a well-documented companion to Mark Kurlansky's Salt. And on the back, it has a lot of nice quotes from other authors who have written books from a global history perspective. For example, after reading Marjane Shafer's Pepper, you'll reconsider the significance of the grinder or shaker on your dining room table, and that was from Mark Pendergrast, the author of Uncommon Grounds, A History of Coffee and How It Transformed Our World. So, first, which book did I like better? Or I don't really do star ratings anymore, or I've never been consistent enough. But I view Mark Kurlansky's Salt is like the OG. It's the 5 out of 5. And Marjane Shafer's is very close after, but a solid 4. And I think it's just because Mark Kurlansky, I've read many of his books now. He has a way of making global history exciting, fascinating, and compelling. But I felt like I did travel the world versus Marjorie's book really took us based on 3 different trade routes or trade lines, if you will, featuring the French, featuring the Dutch, the British, and also some of the Spanish, little influence of the French. But this felt much more global, which is not to say that the pepper trade isn't global. You want to think about like the spice routes all through the Middle East, finding a shipping lane around the tip of Africa. I mean, she goes there. I just found that Mark Kurlansky hit more of a global perspective and covers a history in a little bit of a different perspective. So, in terms of writing, each of Mark Kurlansky's chapters shows the influence of salt in a different moment of time and how it influenced other elements of trade and prosperity. So, for example, there are chapters all about when salt was used to create prosciutto. I'm probably prosciutto, however you want to say that silly word, but cured meats. And he goes into great detail about these cured meats and these little islands in the Mediterranean that became experts of making this cured meat. And now you've heard of like jamon iberico. It's like the most expensive type of salted ham you can get in the world. It's so expensive. But the role of that salt that led to that cured meat, that led to different trade opportunities for these really small regions, and now how there are artisans and families that pass down these traditions year after year, all because of salt. In pepper, I found that it was less about what you could do with pepper. That probably sounds silly. They do break down the different types of pepper, and she also shows pictures of what the pepper plant looks like, which was fascinating for me because I don't know about you, I've only ever seen pepper in a grinder or in a spice rack or on the spice shelf at a grocery store. So this is a picture of a pepper plant. Pretty cool. I found that I learned more fun facts from Mark Kurlansky's book when it came to salt. Like, did you know that the origin of the word salary comes back from ancient Greek and Roman time? I can't remember which one it was, so forgive me all my history friends who are watching this video rolling their eyes. But the warriors and soldiers in the military from the Greek and Roman times were paid their weight in salt. Salt, salary, That is how we got the word salary that we use today. Salt was used as a form of currency and oftentimes was more valuable than gold or whatever the actual currency was at the time. Salt was so important that if you had a little bowl of salt on your table with a serving spoon, you were considered effing rich. It was a really, really big deal, and it was used in rankings of society. Oftentimes the political rulers would keep salt storage for themselves. They would create these aquifers, aren't the right word, but like salt, little salt bays where they could learn to irrigate and evaporate water and have their own salt beds. That's how rich you were. Instead of having an indoor pool, you had your own salt bed because you could have your own salt whenever you wanted. These were big things. In pepper, the role, unfortunately, of conquering indigenous people, indentured servitude, basically bluntly slavery, had more to do with the success of the pepper trade. For example, the Dutch, if they could land somewhere in India, set up a port, that was the big deal. Whoever got to the best trade routes first were going to try to set up ports, and then they would try and enslave the indigenous people or get permission from the indigenous people's ruler, king, sultan, the term changed based on where they were geographically, and basically trick people into stealing pepper. They're like, I'm not gonna burn your city down. I'm totally gonna burn your city down. This just felt scummy, and that's part of global history. But sometimes white people are a bunch of assholes, and you can't escape that. I don't want to knock the author for that, but that is one of the fundamental different approaches, is that in each period and in each chapter, Kurlansky is going to show you salt in a civilization and the role and impact it had. I found pepper to be much more chronological, and we followed, let's call them the same three characters. It was all about the Dutch, and if the Dutch weren't winning, the English were winning, and if the English weren't winning, it was the Portuguese or the Spaniards or the French. And I didn't find it as interesting. I think it got too political for me, personally. I'm sure there are tons of historians or historical readers out there on BookTube who are going to love both of these books equally. Fun fact about the pepper trade. The pepper trade is responsible for the extinction of the dodo bird. Why? Because the dodo bird, we're sailing, we've been sailing around the Cape of Africa for freaking months, we're out of food. They land on the shores where the pepper is meant to be harvested and cultivated. And the dodo bird apparently was one of those really easy to kill animals to get a lot of meat quickly. So they hunted them to extinction. Thanks, pepper trade. Awesome. Meanwhile, salt is responsible, wrong book. Meanwhile, salt is responsible for the near extinction of the codfish. So sailors and settlers from the English colonies came to America, came to Nova Scotia, and needed food. So they learned to salt cod. So salting cod became a way of surviving for a lot of the early pioneers, settlers, and etc. And it led to the overfishing of the codfish, which Mark Kurlansky actually has an entire book about cod, which is so good. I highly recommend. I love Kurlansky's books. So I think, unfortunately for Marjorie, it was gonna be really hard for anyone to beat my love of Mark Kurlansky. All in all, I think both of these books are fantastic. I love world history and the impact of a food item globally. But what I like more about Kurlansky's book is that each civilization has been impacted by salt in a different way. There are chapters dedicated to, like I mentioned earlier, prosciutto, but there are also things like the American Salt Wars. At one point, the British were putting a tax on salt, and the New England colonies were like, no. I also think that salt also talks about the different types of salts. I'm sure a lot of people know about like cracked pink Himalayan salt. What about the corruption in salt, where like dirt and like clay were part of the loads, because a lot of what loads were paid in weight, like bagged weight of salt. It's interesting how in the past, black salt, which is usually found near volcanic environments, back then it was considered dirty and it needed to be white and pure and pristine, and not bleached white pristine like a Morton salt, but naturally white. Now people want black salt, pink Himalayan salt, gray salt, because it's new and exotic, when in reality it's been around all this time. ways that people cheated in pepper shipments is that they would use like wood chips, like wood, they like would refine wood chips down to like powders. Everyone's a scumbag. Everyone's trying to cheat everyone out of $1. But I really enjoyed both of these books. Let me know in the comments below, would you read Salt by Mark Kurlansky? Would you read Pepper by Marjane Shafer? And what other special topic do you want me to read about next? I do have 2 books about spices, which leans more towards, I think, pepper-based plants, that I am thinking about doing a book duo on. But what's another topic you'd love to see a duo about? Let me know. I'm excited to hear what you guys think. If you haven't already, please consider hitting like and subscribe below. I would love for you to be part of my Bookish Foodie family. And wear a mask. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.